Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of P.O.D TV's and Roku TV's World Edition. And on Roku TV, on this show, on World Edition, we talk about global affairs, innovation, and continue our discussion of a new normal as we emerge from the pandemic. Today, my monologue, and I greet you live from the All-America city of Morrisville, North Carolina, in the 8th largest state in the United States. Today, we are beginning our monologue to talk about Victory Day, but also a significant shift in U.S. policy towards Russia and Western policy towards Russia. Victory Day is the day celebrated by allies on the victory over Nazi Germany. And also Russia celebrates this with Russia Day. And President Putin has actually addressed the nation talking about the war and justifying it on the grounds that the invasion of Ukraine is, as like it was, fighting Nazi Germany. He didn't declare war, but he did make no remarks that he was willing to pull back. Which leads me to my comments for the day based on some articles I read this weekend in the New York Times. For the past few decades, the United States and its allies have had a policy of appeasement with Russia, but not really calling it appeasement. After Russia invaded and annexed Georgia and the Crimea, invaded Donbass, shot down a passenger jet, and even interfered in our elections, nothing was done except for modest sanctions. When Putin invaded Ukraine again in February and began this war, sanctions were also sought out, and it was still more or less a policy of appeasement. But now we've seen a significant shift over the last few weeks, with the United States and Western allies providing ammunitions, even giving Strikers, which is weapons they were never willing to give, shoulder-arm fire missiles. They are enabling Ukraine to topple generals, Russian generals, and they even recently took down a Russian a huge ship called the Mossack in the Black Sea. What's made this shift happen? What can we learn from it? Well, I think the most important reason is that the policies of the United States, particularly in countries that have weaker governments, where they're fighting wars on their own soil, Afghanistan the most recent, had not been successful. The Taliban fought, but the government of Afghanistan was corrupt, not a strong, legitimate democracy. And so we failed and there was frustration. We've seen wars like Vietnam as well, with similar challenges. And so this war, I think, is different in that the Ukrainian people showed that they were willing to fight and die for their freedom. Their patriotism has been shown because they have been able to prevent Russia from invading as aggressively as they wanted to, prevent them from taking over cities. And to our surprise, they've been able to protect their airspace relatively well up until now. Now, the final point I will make is this, that this does resemble in many ways Adolf Hitler's invasion of Europe 75 years ago, and this is one of the worst wars that's happened since World War II. The salient and horrific images that we're seeing on the TV have, I think, convinced many folks, many Americans, and many around the world that appeasement no longer is something that we can stand by when we're dealing with Russia. So I see a shift now to what's called confrontation without acknowledging that it's confrontation, because now we are on the cusp of engaging in military confrontation or assisting military confrontation with a nuclear power. Now that is something that scares me, many of us watching this show. And I think President Putin knows that. He knows that he can continue this war, continue the attack, drawing us in, making sure that we know that we are potentially entering into a war with a nuclear power. It's not a war between Russia and the United States yet. but it's certainly starting to feel like it. So that's my analogy today. My comments for today: appeasement without calling it appeasement, and confrontation without acknowledging confrontation. Those are the choices that we face, and that's what we're going to talk about today. With us, we have Mark Lee from our show.
Mm-hmm.
We have Sasha Starr.
Not sure if Sasha's with us yet, but we'll find out. We know we got Chris Greco, and of course,
Well, Chris
he's going to have
Greco.
a lot of opinions about things going on with what you just said about the military and appeasement and things along those lines. And I actually had a quick question that I was going to ask him as well, because I did see something else in the news from another country, that being Singapore. And Singapore has said, and I know that it took us a while to get to this point, that they would not need to enlist women. And I know that we've got women in our military, but definitely it just came out that there is currently no need for Singapore to enlist women for national service, according to their defense minister, Dr. Ning Ing Hin, who argued in Parliament on Monday that the societal cost for doing so, even for non-military roles, would far outweigh any benefits. Ning added that compulsory national service is justified only if it serves a critical need for national security defense. It's far off from the proposal to enlist women to serve in roles such as caregivers and healthcare workers, or to send a powerful signal of gender equality, he said. These are inadequate justifications or reasons to mandate that someone must suspend individual liberties as a civilian, give up 2 years of his or her life, and if they do not, they go to jail, as our courts have sentenced NS defaulters. So just wondering what you think about that, Chris, in comparison to some of our own military, because I do know we have a lot of women in our military, and a lot of women are actually using the military as a way to get both college education, just as men do, and also a way to advance in society and things along those lines. But I didn't know if you had a thought, and I want to say, and I'd be interested to hear from Sasha if he knows how much the women are fighting in that particular country. And I see Shaquille's here, but not Sasha. And then maybe Shaquille will come up and tell us about Australia. But how much different countries have different ideas about the importance of allowing women into the military.
So to get back, I will answer that question, Steve. Basically,
Yeah,
what we're talking about
go back. We'll come back
active.
We'll come back to that question, but let's start today with the notion of appeasement without calling it so, and confrontation without acknowledging it.
Which so, which is called a Cold War. That's what it's called. I mean, you can call it anything you want, but it's a Cold War. In other words, appeasement without acknowledgement, confrontation without acknowledgement, proxy wars, all these things are Cold War. That's a Cold War. Basically, you're having other people use your weapons, testing them, doing whatever needs to be done. I mean, that's a beautiful test is real combat. So, I mean, we are these contractors that are producing these weapons are they're going to make gazillion dollars on this stuff, because basically they are actually testing these weapons in actual combat, and they're being very successful at this point in time. And you do that with a country that is basically overrun by a stronger country, and you say, we'd like to give you these weapons. Now, the Soviets did this in Vietnam. The Soviets and Chinese did it in Korea. Yeah, they did it in Afghanistan. We did it in Afghanistan when the Soviets were in Afghanistan. So it's like this constant testing of weapons, whatever you want to call it, in those areas. Now, I would like to make a comment about, and we'll get back to Singapore in just a second, but Justin Trudeau just went to Kyiv. I just want to make that, I was sitting back going, gee, I haven't seen a Canadian there. By God, he went. So now you got Boris Johnson. You got a couple of EU people. You got UN people. You got and I hate to say this, but where's Joe Biden? Joe Biden went to Romania. She went to.
Hold on a second. He did send Jill. Jill just went over there recently.
Yeah, in Romania. Okay, so I mean, the bottom line is I get this, but you're going to send the first lady, instead of going yourself. I'll tell you something. Joe Biden better get off his butt. He better get on a plane, and he better get over to Kyiv. Because I'll tell you right now, he's not making a lot of. Now, are the Republicans over there? No, they're not making any headway as far as I'm concerned with that, and so they don't exactly get my vote of confidence from the standpoint of being able to get off their butts and get over there and give some support to that. But let me tell you what I talked to a couple of Republicans about this. You know what their deal is? Oh, you know what the Democrats are doing? The Democrats are continuing the war in Ukraine. They're making it so that the war continues, so that they make big deal. And I'm sitting back going, what, where's your head? I mean, the Democrat, nobody wants war. Nobody wants a war to continue. They're over there giving their support. And much as I don't like Pelosi any more than I like this window here, I mean, the bottom line is that she's over there. She went over, she took a risk. She took the Democrats with her. The head of the Intelligence Committee went with her. I mean, I don't understand what the deal is, but this Cold War situation, and Steve, this happened the same way in Vietnam. Republicans went over and Democrats went over to Vietnam, and they made all kind of appearances and all this stuff. And this is like a Cold War plus. This is a Cold War 2.0 is what's going
Mark,
on.
what do you think about that being a Cold War all over again? We sort of grew up.
I mean, I think we've been headed to a Cold War for a while. I mean, it's been a Cold War even between us and China to some degree as well. And like Nick has said several times, I think China just sitting back watching what's going on and things of that nature. I do think that even though I don't think it's going to be successful, I think that definitely Putin was trying to play towards certain nationalism kind of thoughts, even by making the comparison to cleaning out Nazism and hoping that will appeal to certain countries and things of that nature. Like I said, it was the nature of the invasion that I don't think that that's going to work and everything. But, the other thing that I'm concerned about, I'm sure many others are as well, is that they've also made it very clear that meaning the Russians, that they are wanting to carry this out to what they consider the final kind of result of at least conquering part of Ukraine. I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen, and I definitely hope that it doesn't happen. But in that same context, I do worry that, at some point people say that nobody would be daring to press the button, but there are such a thing as tactical nuclear weapons. So the more and more we go into the Cold War, the more and more that becomes a reality. And I do think that he's even mentioned those kind of possibilities of at least launching some tactical nuclears on certain countries. Now, whether that's directly aimed at the Ukraine or whether that's aimed at other parts of the globe, that is a scary thought in this year and this day and time, but it's a very realistic thought. And I don't think that he's like I said, hopefully the generals and others on his department will stop that from happening, but I don't know that it will, and I would not be surprised. I mean, nobody thought we would see a pandemic. Nobody thought we'd see anybody attacking the United States on its own soil and things along those lines. So I would not be surprised if at some point tactical nuclear weapons are not launched, but maybe Chris can ease my fears with what he knows of the military.
Well, first of all, getting back to Singapore real quick, if you don't mind, Steve, the idea about women in the military was always this kind of peripheral aspect in the United States. Right. And then they started to bring women in. They started to put them in the academies and whatever else. And we have found as a military, at least I have, I was growing up with that, but we got to remember, I came in the military in the 1970s when the women were just starting to get involved in right. the military. And I found that they were in many ways, just as or better than male officers. I mean, they did a great job, and they had a lot to put up with. And I have a daughter in the military. She is an officer in the Air Force, and she's had to put up with a lot of crap that I never had to put up with when I came in the Air Force. And let me tell you something. She's a pretty strong individual. You talk about a strong woman. She's a very strong woman. I mean, she's 5 foot. I think she's 5'1", 5'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, this little petite blonde. And I think she has gone toe to toe with 6 foot, male NCOs and basically said, this is what's going to happen. And it happens. So and they respect her for that. It's like, okay, fine, I'll back off. So it's the idea is that Singapore, I think, it's going to take time. But let me tell you something. Mark my words. It may be, sorry, I'm laughing about something else. Yes, she is Shaquille, by the way. But she has a fiance. But the idea behind the idea behind this is that sooner or later, all military organizations will have women, and it's also funny to come up with a situation like Israel. Israel had women in the military from the very beginning. So it's not something that is bad. It's not something that is going to somehow bring down the military or bring the standards down or whatever else. It's gonna I've seen it, and it works very, very, very well. So Singapore, don't worry, Singapore women, you're going to be in the military. It's just going to take a few years to get these guys heads straight.
Hey, Shaquille, does they have women in the military in Australia? Because I'm not that familiar with Australia. It's everybody's military and everything. And how are they treated from what you've heard?
Like, it's not a new thing. I mean, we've had women in the military. In fact, my mother was actually in the Army Reserves way back when, and her feet are so small because my mother's not a big lady, so her feet were so small that they actually didn't have any military boots her size, because she was one of the first females to come through, and so she was given permission to sort of parade in her sneakers, and the training sergeant sort of walked past, inspects everyone's shoes, and she's got these white Reeboks on. So she was in it. Look, I think the women have a valuable contribution in every part of society, and I think I'd just be a little bit concerned about women being actually in the field as military combatants, just for their own safety and because of how brutal some of the enemies can be. But otherwise, I think that women have a valuable part to play, and I'd encourage them to be involved in all sorts of different things. It would be nice in an ideal world that we didn't need to have, a military that is as capable as it is, but we don't live in a utopia and never will. So, I would certainly encourage that.
That's great.
That was fascinating.
So let's ask Nick and Shaquille the first question I asked, and then we can dive into some other issues. But real quickly, Shaquille, this whole idea of appeasement without calling it appeasement, and now confrontation without really calling it confrontation. Do you believe that is basically the same thing as a Cold War that's now emerging between the West and Russia, or will it go beyond that?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much the same. And look, the reality is, if the idea is that Ukraine is for some reason going to allow them to take the eastern part of the country, that's not really a victory for the West, is it? That's allowing Russia to go in there and do what it's done. And there's no great incentive for them not to make further inroads into Europe, attack countries like Moldova, but potentially use chemical weapons or other types of weaponry. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here. I think the West needs to be at least visibly prepared to take the risk of a further escalation in order to quiet things down. I think so. I think Chris's analysis was pretty right on that. And I think a lot of things in politics today and a lot of things in government today, they call it one thing when it's really something else, and everybody knows it's something else. So I'm pretty concerned about the situation over there. And also, let's just remember that Vladimir Putin's been put in a position now where if he loses this war, there's a very high chance that he personally could die. Mm-hmm. So, what are you going to do if you're him? He needs some sort of way out, and there really isn't any, is there, for him? So, I think that this could escalate quite seriously.
Yeah. Nick, your thoughts?
Well, the only way you can confront a bully is to hit him in the nose or hit him hard. And unfortunately, Putin's a bully, and so you got to hit him hard. I also think that part of the reason we're having this problem is we withdrew from Afghanistan. So he saw it as a weakness, so he invaded Ukraine. If we had held our position in Afghanistan, I'm not sure if he would have invaded Ukraine, but I wouldn't give this guy an inch. If you're going to go to the negotiation table with somebody like him, you've got to hit them hard before he'll go to the negotiation table at all. And that's the only way to do it. So I think the U.S. and the West is doing the right thing. Sanctions, supplying Ukraine with all the hardware and toys they can possibly get, and frankly, reduce the Russian army to a rubble. And that should be our attitude. And then, and only then, should you go to the negotiation table once they're in rubble, once you hit them really, really hard. Because all the information I get, I'm daily on the Chinese information sites, they really want to destroy the West. They hate the West. If you think China's our friend, forget it. Okay, and the West is responding properly, I believe, because the corporations in America now say that 66% of the manufacturing they're going to look seriously to bring back into more favored countries and outside of the Chinese domain. And I think that's a good move to make, because we've been too reliant on people that basically hate us. And they don't like the Aussies either, by the way. I found that out too. They think the Australians are out there trying to take the Solomon Islands, and they're going to strike at China and all this other stuff. I mean, these people are not the most friendly people, but I don't have the intelligence that Chris Greco has relating to the Chinese, so I'll defer to my esteemed colleague who is in the U.S. military to give us some more information about my friends at China. I'm only getting one source, Facebook group, Understanding China, and boy, they are pro-Russian. So Chris, maybe you have some better information than I do.
Well, it's interesting you state that, Nick. So back when I was in the Air Force, in 1997, they asked me, as an intelligence guy, they said, could you do a 20-year future on China? What is going to happen in 20 years in China? Now, of course, that only brings us up to 2017, right? So I put together this big, gigantic briefing. I mean, this thing was like 90 slides on different aspects about China, economic, demographic, blah blah blah, did a whole 9 yards. And and at the end, when I presented it to the local, to the, what do you call it, to a focus group, they took a look and they said, Chris, you're off. You're just off. You're not, no, none of this stuff is going to happen. It's not going to, it's not going to be like that, blah, blah. And I said, look, they're going to be a major force to contend with in 20 years, a major force. This is not a dumb country. Yes, right. A lot of people, but they're not dumb. They're very, very intelligent.
Very, very smart.
And they're going to take technology, and they're going to take education. They're going to take all this stuff from U.S. and from Western aspects. They're going to incorporate it in their culture. And the next thing you know, they're going to persuade us, through infrastructure to be able to do what needs to be done. And it was like, no, we're not going to present this. Go back to the drawing board and do whatever you want to do. At that point, I had another assignment that just came up, and it was like, guys, I'm out of here. So I'll see you later. Good luck. Here's my stuff. Here's my research, whatever else. Do what you want with it. They didn't do a thing with it. So, that's kind of like what the military does.
But Chris, on the flip side of that, and I want to know what other people think about this. From what I understand of China, and I've actually had the fortune that I think both parents went there and visited many years ago, like decades ago and everything. But, for decades, China has definitely been incorporating a lot of Western influences into their society and into their culture. There's no accident that McDonald's and some of our other major franchises are there as well. So definitely, are you, Nick, saying that maybe we need to pull back from that kind of relationship, or what is your proposal, since we are definitely intertwined a lot in China?
Mark, you'd have to be very concerned about the cultural appropriation that's going on, wouldn't you, about the Chinese taking on Western traits? And this can't happen, can it? This isn't allowed.
We have to be serious about China, because here's what they always throw in my face. Look at their rail system, their train system, which, by the way, when you look at it, it is really true. Great. I mean, the thing is, Mark, they have really perfected rails, high-speed rails from city to city, moving people around. I mean, if you look at their train system, you look like ours. We look like we just came out of third world country, and they look like they're a first world country. I'm sorry. So,
but you also have the most expensive per mile costs of laying new railroads.
Who, in the United States?
In the United States, and it's
that's because we have certain certain cities that are like somebody says,
it's
well,
not.
it's so
But it's not
expensive.
by a small. It's not by a small amount. It's not just the cost of the land. It's the cost of the bureaucracy.
Yeah,
So you've got
cost of
the
bureaucracy, right?
advanced
You got to cut that
countries
down.
like Germany, like the UK, throughout London, etc. That will run you somewhere within the 100 to 200 million a mile mark.
Yeah.
And you've got the United States coming in at an average price of 750 million a mile.
Yeah, which
And
is
that's why-
absolutely ridiculous. I agree with you,
course.
Shaquille, that one problem you have is all the graft and corruption that takes place in getting rail lines, but it doesn't solve the problem. Because when you look at China, they're number one in the world on high-speed rail. Number two is Spain, believe it or not. Where's the United States? The United States is asleep at the wheel, and we're
But
asleep
it's
at the
so-
wheel in a lot of places. And
Germany's
China
trying to-
is overtaking us in education. They're overtaking us in economics. They're overtaking us in rail. And you know what? They want to overtake us. They want to be the dominant force in the world, and the United States and what they call the West can go sit on it and rotate, including this whole thing with Ukraine and Russia. They back Russia. They think it's the real problem is the West. It's because we invaded Vietnam 30 years ago. We invaded Afghanistan. We destroyed Afghanistan. We destroyed Iraq. This is all the garbage that's coming out of China right now. Part of it is true. Part of it is not true, but they don't care because China should rule the world, not the United States of America and the West, according to China. Now, with that in mind, Russia did us a great favor. You know what the favor was? They united the European Union more aligned with the United States. And if you add our economy with their economy, we're twice as big as China. And I'll let them know that. Because if we pull out of China and Europe pulls out of China, China's economy will sink like a rock to the bottom of the ocean. Now, with that in mind, we also have to be very careful of India. You think India is our friend? Maybe not. They're still trading with Russia like it was no tomorrow. Don't give a rat's rear about the United States of America. So with that, the West seems to be united, but we have to be very careful about when we go outside of the West. We don't have friends, and I can tell you right now they're not our friends. I'm surprised we trade with them at all, given the attitude I've got.
Well, you've got no choice. You've got no choice. You've got a country. You've got a country, and the rest of the West joins you on this. That can't produce penicillin. That can't produce vitamin C. That at the moment there's a shortage of baby formula and toddler formula in the United States, a milk producing country, like there has been shortages in Australia for years. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't manufacture clothes and textiles. You know, there's all these things.
You're right, Shaquille. These are
products and all of that. Which
these are important geopolitical issues. You're right, but you know what? You know what our election's being based on? Okay, right now, First Amendment rights. They go into guns, abortion, and First Amendment rights. None of the politicians, none of them, are talking about the economic, geopolitical problems.
That's right.
We face with China.
It's not an emotional issue.
You know what?
It's not a political issue. This is how
not emotional.
But that's not true. That's not true. You had a president that talked about exactly those issues. Donald Trump talked about those even before he ran for president. He was talking about those 30, 40 years ago. He talked about those sorts of issues, and he criticized the political regime in America and around the world for just being so incompetent and for not dealing with those things. When he became the president, that was the core things that he focused on. He focused on trying to make America great again. He said it, but he was talking about bringing jobs back to America. He was talking about weaknesses and things that don't make sense, like Germany and the rest of Europe buying so much oil and gas from Russia, sending billions of dollars to Russia and then expecting the US taxpayer to pay for their defense through NATO, whilst other NATO nations weren't contributing properly. He talked about all these things and he was viciously attacked time and time and time again because in a speech, he said something out of place. He paused at the wrong moment. Was it racist? Did he call all Mexicans rapists? Did he do this? Did he do that? And there was never any focus on what it was that he was trying to achieve. And then he had this very, very hostile relationship with the media. And you guys all sat there and said, yes, but he's racist and he's a horrible person.
I agree. Shaquille, he'd be a great president if he had a brain. Unfortunately, he didn't have a brain, and so he lost the election.
Really?
Right. And the thing is, to give you an idea how much he doesn't have a brain, he denies he even lost the election. So unfortunately, you have a guy who has a lot of leadership capacity without a brain. and so he's not
Well,
president.
let's go back. Let's go back to education. Let's go back to education just for
Let's
a second.
go to
'cause
education.
I've been
We're
doing.
going to take in 10
I've been
minutes.
doing
We're
it.
going to do a recap of political stuff. We got the headlines,
bet.
but let's go to education.
The headlines
So
that you have
education.
massive protests about abortion, Steve. I think you better talk to us about why that's justified.
So let's
Yeah,
talk about
we will.
China. Let's talk about China and education. So you take education. You say how many engineering degrees are conferred in the United States versus engineering degrees conferred in China, right? So you take a look at those figures, and I'm trying to research them right now.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
really
curious.
difficult, but I'm going to tell you right now, they don't get degrees in organizational leadership. China doesn't get degrees in organizational leadership and whatever else. They don't get a degree in Black studies. They don't get a degree in women's studies. They don't get a degree in, you know why? Because they don't give a crap about that. What they care about is engineering, cybersecurity, computer science, all that stuff, and technology. Why? Because technology rules the world.
Yeah.
Technology is the thing that is going to take over countries. Not women's studies, not Black studies, not African American, none of that. And you know, I'm okay with taking that as a minor, taking that as some elective aspects. I'm good with that. Religious studies, all that. But if we don't start getting more engineers, if we don't start getting more STEM people, and Mark, you know this, we need more minorities, more women and men of color in the engineering and STEM.
Engineering fields.
Push them really, really hard. And yes, do it. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm teaching, I teach cybersecurity.
I would agree.
I'm going
with
to
you.
close my monologue. I'm going to close my monologue on that very point. Now,
Good.
No, and just to come back to something that definitely Chris was saying, and I'd love to hear if Shaquille comes back his thoughts about this and everything. But I think I brought it up before that I was doing some research of my own and everything because a friend of mine was actually looking for a therapist. And we won't say why they needed the therapist or what type of therapist they needed and everything. But they were finding it was hard to find even 3% of the people out there that were actually regular medical doctors that were in the African American community. So it definitely sounds like that is a field that has got some serious disparities and all along those lines. And I know that sometimes there are certain fields that maybe we will never get to the correct percentage of the population versus the people that are there in the field. But I definitely think that medicine, and there are some other fields as well, are ones that can use some vast improvements. And it definitely, I think there's only 3 HBCUs, Meharry, I think, being one of them, that even have a medical program and all along those lines. And there are lots of HBCUs around the country, but there are only a select few that have those kind of programs that exist. I know Central has a strong biology department, but they don't have a medical department. And some of those folks then, if they're lucky, will go off to Duke and some of the other stronger medical schools and all of that. So they might get into some of the what are considered pre-med courses. But definitely it does sound like we need to have some more education having in the higher education level. So I would definitely agree with you on that. And engineering is another one that needs to happen as well.
Yeah,
so,
we're going to talk about that. Yeah, exactly. And I'm actually going to reach out to Dr. Scott Rawls at Wake Tech to see, and I'm going to talk about some of the stuff they're going on there, which is amazing in terms of cutting edge education, how they're really revolutionizing and really bringing a paradigm shift education in North Carolina, which I think is something we have to do. But real quickly, just to shift a couple of national things. So Jill Biden, First Lady, surprise visit to Ukraine to meet the First Lady of Ukraine. That was interesting. Zelensky is still saying we're not doing enough, so I sort of cut that part out of my monologue. But I think that's still. I think we're doing a lot more than we have done. But there are some people saying we're not doing enough. But I think it's that kind of the balance. And Mitch McConnell is saying that we could call for a national abortion ban. But
make it a law.
Yeah,
make it a law and let it go. I mean, make it a law and then have it go to the Supreme Court. Don't let the Supreme Court legislate from the bench.
Here's what we should be talking about. This is a great book called Red-Handed. If you guys haven't seen it, you should get it. It's by Peter Schweitzer. It's about how China has basically infiltrated every part of our country, from the finance to the politics. They own the Democratic Party. They own Michael Bloomberg. They own everybody, with the threat of, if you don't play Chinese way, then Chinese gets rid of you. I mean, it's really kind of
But
simple.
but Nick, hold on,
yeah,
hold on a second. Nick, hold on a second. Because if I remember correctly, we oftentimes talk about
This
the
should be
infrastructure.
required
No, wait a minute.
reading.
We oftentimes talk
Required
about the
reading.
infrastructure, and we talk about the
Yeah.
importance of the infrastructure, even the infrastructure in the United States. And I don't claim to be the greatest historian in the world, but I did do a little bit of study of the way that the train systems were built. And from what I understand, it's not something new. The Chinese workers were actually a major part of the reason that we have a train system and everything, because they were definitely one of the moving forces, particularly when the trains moved over there to the West. Am I not correct in that, Chris? You are a student more of history than I am, but it's definitely what I
There's the new
there was
president.
a lot of involvement from the Chinese population, and these were Chinese immigrants, particularly over there around San Francisco and around the California area, in terms of building our railroads, from what I understand.
Railroads, all that. Yes. Well, interesting. So I just got some preliminary data. Engineering degrees in 2020, 199,790 for the U.S. For China, 1,381,245. So there's your comparison of engineering degrees conferred in U.S. versus China.
Yep.
On those stats, the United States is producing more per capita than China is.
Well, I'd have to take a look at that to 320 million,
1 million
right?
to 1.6
Versus
billion.
1. So I'd have to take
100,000 to 300 million.
You're
I'm
right.
not sure about that.
Good.
I'm not sure about that, but I am sure
Well,
that
they produce 10 times more, and they've got 5 times more of the population, right? So.
They do have a greater population, but it also just demonstrates what's going on. That none of the politicians, like the ads I see here in North Carolina and around the country, it's all abortion, gay rights, gun control, you name it, and that's the reason you should vote for me. None of them talk about Medicare's going to go insolvent, Social Security's go insolvent, China's taking over the world, our trade deficit's out of control because apparently you can't get elected on that stuff.
Well, let's not forget another major issue, because there's a lot of people that are talking, as I've said a couple of times on this show and other shows, that about the situation with Mexico and the Mexican border. As I said before, a politician that many people thought was moderate. Some people thought that he might have gone more conservative when he became governor, but most people that I know still consider McCrory to be moderate. But he definitely, because his opponent is definitely seems to be leading and was definitely having the support of Trump and everything. So if you watch some of his latest ads, that's all around the Mexican border. There's some around gun control and other things around that line. But he's definitely trying to pull more toward appealing toward a certain base that they have as well. And I'm not saying that the people on the Democratic side don't appeal to bases.
And in the meantime, China takes over. You're not going to need a border anymore. What you need to do is talk to Xi Jinping and ask him how the United States should be governed, because he's going to govern the U.S. anyway, the way we're headed, because all we're doing is fighting issues that are ridiculous and not really spending time.
Speaking of issues that are ridiculous,
what the U.S. companies are doing, though, Mark? They plan on rebringing their companies back from China and the manufacturing sector and locate it in Mexico. Like, they're not even located in the United States.
By the way,
Mexico is where they want to put their.
I think Disney threatened the same thing.
You've got the agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States.
NAFTA.
If you're looking at a place to domicile your business, the United States would be the last of those three countries to locate, because of the bureaucracy, because of just things like, when you try to have these race-based quotas, gender-based quotas, sexuality-based quotas, and this and that, and there's all these different things that you've got to comply with. You just sit there and go, you know what, it's too hard. And then if I get it right, I'm going to be taxed to death. It's just too hard. Why go there? Especially when you've got the NAFTA agreement, so you can actually trade with America without actually having to have much of a presence there. It's not a good thing.
So if the LGBT community decides to push Disney to go to Mexico, you'll be perfectly all right with that and everything, because that is what seems to be going on.
Mark,
go for it.
Mark, I would, because
I'd be okay with that.
Instead of this being a live and let live situation like it has been throughout most of my life, Now, all of a sudden, it is that this has to be the focus point. Okay. So before, when it was, you do you, and I don't really care what you do in your bedroom, what you do in your house. Now, all of a sudden, it's the only thing that matters when it comes to hiring. And by me not taking into consideration what your sexual expression is, or your gender identity, or your gender preferences, or whatever, I somehow am against you, right? Not that it should be I shouldn't care at all and I shouldn't even ask the question. Now I have to ask the question to make sure I can hit a certain quota. That's not a sustainable thing. And
Well,
it's
I heard
for a lot of people.
Yeah, I heard the most interesting argument yesterday, and unfortunately, it wasn't on our network, but it's on a friend of mine that invites me sometimes to her show and everything. And she will tell you in a heartbeat that she is pro reparations. And she was actually talking about what happened to Jim Clyburn, the majority whip, I believe he is. And he was asked, or kind of like encountered and forced his hand to say one way or the other whether he was supporting that or not. But it kind of comes to what you've talked about before, which is that she sometimes finds that this whole abortion issue is almost like a red herring, because she would like everything to be kind of like focused on the reparations issue. And she's like, wait a minute, this whole issue of abortions is distracting from what she was feeling, and others have felt as well, was a movement toward getting reparations for the African-American population. So I just found that very fascinating. I don't know what folks' thoughts are about that. One about Jim and Clyburn.
How does that create more
I can tell you now that the connection between abortion or insert any subject and issues to do with black people in America is just not there, right? It's just clutching at straws to bring everything back to race, and it shouldn't be there. The thing with abortion at the moment is, for the United States, is that you have any kind of sincerity in the beliefs of democracy and liberal democracy and representative democracy, then you would have to say that abortion should be legal in the United States. Okay, but where should the cutoff be? Should it be at the heartbeat? Should it be 15 weeks? Should it be 7 weeks? Wherever it is, where should that cutoff be? Well, that should also be something which is reflective of the morality of the people. Most people, 65% or something, 2/3 of America, believe that abortion should be legal, but only 6% of abortions believe that you should be able to have late term up until the day of birth abortions. And if you actually have a look at how it's written, how the laws are written to allow those late term abortions, where you can go down the path of partial birth abortions, that is not a popular view. That is not something that's supported by most Americans. But yet, what have the politicians given you? The politicians have framed it as if it's no abortions under any circumstances versus an abortion 5 minutes before the birth of the child. This is ridiculous, and it's so divisive. And then you've got these other political factions that will jump in and will say things like, "Well, what about what about reparations for black people?" Or you have the LGBTQ community that have criticized Kamala Harris for saying in her speech over the weekend, how dare they tell a woman what she can do and can't do with her own body. Yet the LGBT community say, well, what about men? Men can give birth too. What she should have said was, how dare they tell birthing people? And most people are not happy with the term birthing people. Most people are not happy with the term chest feeding. But it's being thrust upon them. Meanwhile, China is teaching their year 9 students and year 8 students computer programming.
That's right.
I mean, we wonder where the problem is.
And how to engineer high speed.
Before we get to
it, that's right. So maybe we should focus more on things that are actually
how to have better bombs. I mean, China is just
maybe we should focus more on those things that are going to be important
the United States,
in the West, and are actually going to help our children succeed and be competitive internationally in the West. As opposed to focusing on all these dividers.
Hold on a second. And I know definitely Steve wants to get back to a point and everything. But my other point that I'm getting ready to ask is, I agree with you about the percentages and everything. But unfortunately, in some cases, and I don't know that Nick is going to agree with me because of some of his own religious beliefs and everything, but in some cases, the religious community seems to want to force the hands of having to go on one side, and maybe it's a side that is not necessarily biblically founded and things of that nature, because definitely there are a lot of folks that would disagree with you within the religious community. And I know that you have friends in that community as well, Shaquille, that they would say that abortion, while the percentages of the society may not agree with, may say that abortion is allowable at a certain time frame. There are a lot of people in the religious community, particularly among the fundamentalists and particularly among certain religions, that are like no abortion whatsoever, no matter what the time of the year is, no matter whatever, once that baby has been conceived. And once we figured out it's been conceived, we're not cutting it off at all, because that's what certain religious beliefs are.
Well, yes. The Abrahamic religions especially have that view, but whether or not they have that view or not is irrelevant. Whether or not the adherents to that hold that view is irrelevant. What's relevant is at what point you believe the government should be able to step in and regulate and legislate that. Now, the Supreme Court, even prior Supreme Court justices in America, had said that Roe v. Wade and Casey were cases that really didn't fit within the Constitution, that they were peripherally, kind of putting that in there, and really it should go back to the state legislature. I think that the idea now that you're going to have people doxing Supreme Court justices and going out and protesting and trying to intimidate not just the justices but their families, that is not the right way to resolve a political conflict. If there should be some push to federalize this, then, hey, maybe the United States should adopt another amendment to allow abortion if they want it to be legal across all the states and go through the process.
Hold a second. I asked that question to the same friends I was talking about around reparations, and I am not a lawyer, don't claim to be a lawyer. I have friends like Nick that are.
Not a lawyer
but definitely it seems to me that you have to have a lot of moving parts in order to have an amendment passed. And I think that is something that we probably should consider. But I remember the whole conversation, I think it was around the 70s, around an amendment that we still don't have, which was the Equal Rights Amendment, because I think you have to get a certain amount of states to pass it, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well, that's right.
And
you've got to have 2/3. But what you end up with now is you end up with the gamemanship that goes on. And because the US political system by design is a little bit different to what the rest of the Western countries have, the rest of the Westminster systems have, because of the fact that you're a republic, you're supposed to be able to resolve your conflicts internally. And instead, what you see is this gamemanship. Republicans once asked for the end of the filibuster as well. Now the Democrats are saying, well, we want to end the filibuster. Little things like that it's just gamemanship, where you're going to. If you end the filibuster, you end up with a position where minorities don't get within the Congress or within the Senate don't have any say at all, and so whoever has 51 votes can just do whatever they like. But if you don't end it, you end up with the minority being able to control the Senate and just block stuff for years. I was reading a statistic the other day that you now got 1/5 of the amount of bills being passed through the Senate as what you had in the 70s. But that's because the filibuster has been used by both sides just to thwart the Senate, as opposed to there being any real kind of changes made. The original idea behind the filibuster was it would allow for bills to get broad support, and so you would get your 60 votes, and that's how things are passed. So what have they done now? They're making suggestions like, well,
you can even filibuster by email now, which a lot of people don't realize.
That's amazing. What's your alternative, though, Steve? If you want to get rid of the silent filibuster, what do? You're going to actually ask. You're actually going to ask for 41 senators to hold the floor for that period of time. I mean, we're going to sort of go back to archaic practices. There has to be some sort of mechanism that actually allows what the system is supposed to be, which is, one, a system of checks and balances, and two, that bills get broad support, that people that are just not passing bills to be obstinate will be shown up for doing that. But instead, it's evolved into this gamemanship. And as I said, meanwhile, China, the Middle East, many of these other countries that we all
it's funny.
teaching their kids and different things. They're investing in their hospitals, they're investing in their education,
they're investing in
all sorts of things.
I agree, but I mean that's part of what is going on, and I think there's another one coming up shortly, maybe in another week or two. But if you actually follow what the Black Business Olympics is about, it's about getting computers and getting more people into the fields that you're saying that we need to get into, and all of that. So that's just actually the whole purpose of that whole activity that's been airing on the network for now 2 years or whatever along those lines. I did have, and I know that Steve's getting ready to wind down everything, but I had a lighthearted topic that I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to talk about it with Shaquille, because I know that he's into the sporting world and all of that. And I don't know that we've ever had an 80-1 horse win and a scratch horse win at that. And that is what happened at the Kentucky Derby. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that, because the Kentucky Derby had a winner that came literally out of nowhere. I think it was a hometown horse and everything. And he was an 80-1 shot, and he was definitely
had a bet on that horse.
Oh, well, I will be honest with you. I haven't actually even watched it yet. I do intend to. Obviously, have the $1 Million Chase. I'm wearing the shirt. We had the $1 Million Chase over the weekend, and the dog that won it was a very, very talented dog. It ran an extremely fast time, and it was actually owned by a syndicate. And one of the syndicate members, or a few of the syndicate members, are actually good friends of mine. So let's just say it's been a big weekend.
Yeah, well, that actually is a Kentucky Derby worth watching. In other words, even on a replay, that was incredible. What happened? That horse, 80-1 shot, beats the two front runners in the last couple seconds. It was like, you got to be kidding me. And had a lot of horsepower.
That's the thing with those sorts of races. Yeah. Every horse, every dog has a chance of winning it. And you know what? The horse doesn't know what price it is.
Yeah, no, the horse doesn't care.
No, that was a great quote from, I believe it was one of the owners, because the owner was asked about entering a race, and he basically said that he never enters a race that he doesn't expect to win, which is definitely the kind of philosophy that I think most people in the sporting world have, whether it's in team sports or whether it's in these kind of individual sports like dog and horse racing and everything. So I would just
if you're going into a group race, then you do tend to enter, even if you're not quite sure. But otherwise, yeah, you generally won't race if you don't think you have a very good shot at winning.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Mark, I'm not an engineer, but I play one on TV, and I've solved the Roku problem. So you'll see a lot of new shows already on our Roku network, and I get them all on now. I figured it out.
I think you sell yourself short, Nick.
I figured it out. Believe it or not.
Between lawyers and politicians, you guys know everything. You guys know everything about every subject. Hence the reason why you guys make the rules, because you guys know everything.
Because we know everything.
And that's why the more politicians you've got, the more bullshit you've got to put up with.
Yes.
People, right? Because it just screws everything up.
Yeah, but
that's why I've made the comment many years ago that if you really care about the environment, the last thing that you would want to do is to entrust the environment and environmental issues to politicians, because they're just going to screw it up, and they have.
Speaking of screwing up things and everything, and it comes back to the Kentucky Derby. I was watching it, and of course they do all the race conversations before and everything. And one of the things that happened was Jack Harlow, who is a American rapper and a pretty good rapper from what I understand, and wrote a song about the Kentucky Derby. He has been kind of groomed in his career by Drake, a leading rapper and everything. So they were being interviewed, and in the middle of the interview, they basically said, "Hey, we're over here, and y'all are telling us to cut it off and everything. We're basically drunk, so why are you bothering us?" and all of that. So I'm sitting there going like, if this isn't a matter of maybe some people needed to have control over, or their handlers actually controlling them, this was definitely one of those.
That horse was really bucking. I mean, it was amazingly how aggressive the horse was. Now, you wonder if he had drug issues, because remember, Bob Baffert was thrown out because he drugged his horses. Right. To make matters worse, 74 horses have died under his care, custody, and control the last several years. So the guy he pushes things to the limit and then some. So now he's been banned from, at least temporarily, from the Kentucky Derby, maybe back next year. But he's a trainer that basically drugged his horses in the pursuit of profit, then becomes really rich. And then we worship him, and we don't want to tax him because he, quote, earned it. Yeah, right. By cheating, and he earned it. So we do have to change our tax and economic structure. But I also agree with Shaquille and Chris Greco. We've got to focus more on science, technology, engineering, math. I mean, if not, we're falling behind. And right. China is moving ahead at a very rapid clip, while we're sitting there discussing our politicians' stupid issues about abortion, gay rights, gun control, and things that will not put more money in anybody's pocket.
Oh, and free speech, where you've got your mainstream media saying, look, we've got to have the Department of Truth to quash disinformation. and oh no, what if you have Twitter in the hands of Elon Musk? And then all of a sudden people can actually express their views you would be a free for all with free speech. How
Trump
bad?
is still banned on Twitter.
The thing is,
Trump is still banned on Twitter.
Free speech
You hear that?
is really
Trump.
important, as we well know. And in China, I try to get this program in China. I get blocked by China all the time. I mean, I cannot get there. I'm in a lot of these countries. These things go out. I see all the reports. We get a lot of people watching now in Brazil for some reason. I don't get it. And Mexico, China, Peru, Peru. People even watch us in Russia. Lord knows why we get all these people in Russia. They probably hate us, but they're watching us anyway.
Well, it's time to close out. I'm going to bring up a couple points before we move.
Okay,
to
I'm going to go to the
out.
next. I'm going to go to the next show.
Real quickly, I'm going to just make a couple points before I close out. We forgot to mention Imelda Marcos' son, Bong Marcos. That's his nickname. Is projected to become the next president of the Philippines, and we'll talk about some other things going on around the world, particularly Roe v. Wade. We'll talk about tomorrow, but there is a call to action by Planned Parenthood. So as Shakil Latimer had alluded to, there will be protests across the country next Saturday, and you'll start to see many state legislatures start deciding what they're going to do. So we'll continue our discussion of abortion rights and the debate. But my final take is to focus a little bit and a precursor to what I think we'll be talking on the show this year, and that's the policies of the United States to accelerate job creation and to catch up with our science, engineering, and technology and math, which is traditionally known as STEM, STEM education. Clearly, as has been alluded to on the show, we're falling behind with producing enough engineers. And in North Carolina, we have a great model that I think is a really great paradigm shift in education, community colleges. At one of our community colleges, Wake Tech, they've actually started an early career STEM high school where a high school kid can enroll in computer science and advanced technology courses and get their college credits early. So when they go into high school, they're even further ahead. In addition, the Wake Tech Community College RTP campus and Wake Tech College across the state have many, many courses for cybersecurity, analytics, artificial intelligence, emerging areas of technology, where they can get significant training that can prepare them for jobs that they're filling now. And they're using this as an economic development tool to actually recruit companies. So when the governor of our state brings in a company, they actually focus on the community college to develop what they call customized training. I could go on, but my final point is this. As John Chambers said a few years ago in a virtual startup summit, that over the next decade, we will automate 10% of the jobs we know, 40% of the jobs we know of today. But we have an opportunity to create 15 million new jobs, 15 million around the world globally. And many of these jobs will be with startups. They will be around emerging technologies like AI, like robotic process automation, like cybersecurity. So we have an opportunity in the United States to, yes, create those new jobs, but have policies that provide education and training so that our young children in the schools can be prepared for those jobs. Not only the jobs of today, but the jobs for tomorrow. And finally, an immigration policy that actually doesn't just entice folks to come and get educated here and then leave, but one that brings citizens in who are coming here legally, those with advanced degrees in engineering and science, and have them stay in America to actually fill the jobs that we need and also enable our companies to continue to grow and capture market share. If we don't do that, they will start going to Canada. They already are in other parts of the world. We'll be talking about this more on future shows when I plan to bring in Dr. Rawls, who runs Wake Tech Community College, and Tom Stitt, who runs the community college system of North Carolina, because I think it is a paradigm shift that we need to continue to talk about so that we in the United States can have more engineers and actually more scientists innovating, creating jobs, and doing what we've always done best. From our family to yours, we thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for another edition of World Edition. Be safe.